You're listening to Kika's Corner on WNHH LP 103.5 FM, your home for community radio. And for some reason, I don't hear you guys. Hold on. One more time. You're listening to Kika's Corner on WNHH LP 103.5 FM, your home for community radio. There you go.
Thank you so much, Harry. Good afternoon, mi gente. Hello, and welcome to Kika's Corner. My name is Kika Matos, and I am your host. On this show, we talk about our community, our city, and the world, but always, we always do it through a social justice lens. Let's get started. I'm going to do a little bit of framing before I introduce you to my hosts. In the first 8 months of 2021, the city of New Haven, our city, has had more homicides than it did in all of 2020. FBI statistics confirm the rising violent crime rates in the city. The last homicide was just a few weeks back, that of Traquan Lawrence. It was homicide number 22 in the city. In the month of September alone, there were 3 homicides in just 4 days. Some neighborhoods have been particularly hard hit, and Fairhaven is one of them. It's been impacted by violence, and it has had 42 confirmed shots fired this year, which is an increase of 121% over the shots fired last year. One of those shootings took place outside of the Grand Cafe on East Pearl and Grand Avenue, which is a known hotspot for crime. In the last 4 years, there have been 64 reported incidents of crime and violence in that hotspot, including carjackings, shootings, and open-air drug dealing. Despite all of this, the city has lacked a strategic response to the rise in crime. New Haven's proud tradition of community policing is dead and gone. City Hall and the New Haven Police Department leadership seem out of touch with our community. In recent response to all of this, the city has done a lot of hand-wringing and recitation of generic services that are allegedly meant to tackle the violence, but it continues. Dissatisfied and quite frankly appalled by the city's lack of response, neighbors in Fairhaven came together in early September to engage in their own form of violence interruption. Inspired by a neighborhood anti-violence initiative from Minneapolis, Fairhaven residents took up the mantle to step up where the city has failed. With me today are 2 badass women who I love and respect, and I'm happy to say that they are my neighbors, Sarah Miller and Karen DuBois Walton. Sarah is a longtime Fairhaven resident who is running, thankfully, for Alder in Ward 14. She has a long and incredible history of community organizing. Karen is also a Fairhaven resident. She lives on my street. She heads up Elm City Communities, and she too has a long and amazing history of community engagement. She also served as deputy mayor at City Hall, so she also knows the inside of government and how it works. Karen and Sarah, welcome to the show.
Thank you. Hi, Kika.
So tell me, each of you, how long have you lived in Fairhaven, and why did you choose this neighborhood? And Karen, since I am inclined to be a lefty, I'm going to start with you, and then I'll go over to Sarah.
I came to New Haven in 1985 as an undergraduate student, and I fell in love with New Haven. And New Haven was, as my older son, who's a hip hop artist, says, it was half pretty and half gritty. And I loved it. I loved both I loved the grittiness of it. I loved New Haven. And so I knew I was going to make my home here. I did my graduate work in Boston, and I came right back here. So I have lived in Fairhaven since 1994, and own my home on East Pearl Street for the past 21 years.
Sarah.
So I've lived in New Haven since I was 3. I've lived in Fairhaven now about 20 years. I followed my husband here. I had friends out here. I didn't know the neighborhood. But I have really come to love it and feel like this is just, fits our life in so many ways. It's just the perfect combination of beauty and grit. I think those are beautiful words, Karen, for describing not just the city, but also our neighborhood. There's a lot of things that are wonderful here, but also a lot of work to do. And it's the kind of place I want to raise my kids so that they learn what it is to be engaged and to make a difference and to make where you live better.
Let's talk about the events leading up to the violence interruption efforts that we've all been involved in. And let's use the shooting outside of Grand Cafe as a starting point. Sarah, I believe you were the one who let Karen and I know about the shooting. Talk to us about what happened that night.
Yeah, so we were driving home from a family event across town, and the ambulances were coming by us, and we drove by and saw the tape, and my 10-year-old in the back seat says, "Don't tell me it's another shooting." And I hadn't really realized that he knew what was going on. And for me, that was sort of a signal that this is really out of control. This has reached a point at which we really can't tolerate it anymore. So as is often the case in our neighborhood, when we have a problem, we sort of sprung into action. So I called Karen, I called you, it's on your street. And I said, this is out of control and we got to do something. So we kind of started talking about it that night.
Karen, I know you and your husband, Kevin, walked over as soon as Sarah reached out to you. What did you see?
Yeah, we walked up the street and saw the police crime tape out. We saw a number of neighbors and residents standing around. We saw a ton of police presence at that point, and found Sarah out there and started talking immediately. There were a few things that were striking. As a community resident who is not afraid to call the police and interact with the police, I was disturbed that there was no interaction with us, no attempt to come over and ask us anything or get information with us. And we actually initiated that. Sarah walked right up to a detective and introduced herself and started a conversation. We started to piece together a little bit what we could find out from being out there. But it was a place that we have been concerned about. We talk about it every community management team meeting that the neighborhood has talked about. And so I observed what we've been talking about, a fairly dark parking lot, not well lit, overgrown shrubbery and trees, a lot of litter around, and a lot of people, standing around in that area.
Sarah, you were quick to mobilize around this particular incident. Even though we know that spot has been, what we call a hot spot for violence. What was it about this particular shooting that just was the turning point for you?
I think for me, it was my son noticing it. And also just how close it is to my house, to the homes of so many people I care about. And that it was like the second time in a very short period of time. So just this feeling that it had reached a level that was different from, what we had experienced previously. And that, we can't tolerate that. So, right in our neighborhood, right so close to where there's a school, there's a daycare next door, just sort of all the factors lined up for it to feel like it was something that really required an action.
Talk to us about the meeting that you organized right after that, because it felt like you were very quick to reach out to all of us, and then it was just a blur of activity, and you quickly moved to organize. So tell us about that first meeting on Zoom that you decided to put together.
Sure. So I reached out to our other Fairhaven alders. The next morning, we started reaching out to everybody to say we need to do something about this. And I think there were other folks feeling the same way, but hadn't really expressed it or hadn't had a vehicle for communicating it. So there was immediately a very strong response of yes, we need to do something and come together to talk about what that would be. We put together that meeting for, I think, a Thursday. And next thing we know, the city's holding another meeting in Fairhaven on Friday, So there was sort of a ripple effect of people all of a sudden paying attention. And so that meeting itself, we had state representatives on, we had a lot of local folks, and we first just wanted to try to get everybody on the same page in terms of information. So we had the district manager explain what's been going on, what the hotspots are, and what some of the dynamics have been, and let people really ask their questions. And that was the bulk of the meeting. And we extended it, I think, by a half an hour or so to create time to really talk about next steps. And that's where we agreed that our first action would be at the cafe, that we would be there every night through the end of the month. We didn't really define what that would look like at that point. We just decided we were going to be there. Karen also took on taking up the liquor commission, which is another piece of the strategy.
So Karen, talk to us about the strategy, because my own sense of that meeting was that it was the first, I would say the first half of that meeting, there was just so much anger and grief and pain and frustration with the city. There were 60 people on the call. We had one person representing the city, and that was Lieutenant Fumiati. And it felt like we then transitioned to reach the consensus that we were going to take the matter into our own hands and came up with a strategy. But talk to us about how you felt about that meeting and what you observed.
Yeah, I love and have loved working with you two ladies on this, because we each sort of, I think, took on the piece that really sort of fit with who we are. And my thing was like, I'm going to figure out what is going on here and gather some data. And so I set about getting information out of the city, and I asked for the police reports for this location, and I asked for the ownership information, and I asked for when LCI and the health department had been out, and just like, let's get a picture of it, because I know what it feels like to me, and I know where I think we need to be focusing it, but let's back that up with something. And so I got a stack going back to like 2016 of the police calls for service for that location, and spent my afternoon going through those and reading report after report. And the reason we really focused in on the Grand Cafe was because that's what kept coming up in report after report. That institution being there is clearly drawing problems to our neighborhood. And I say that because there were numerous assaults that started out of that location. There were numerous incidents of drug dealing out of that location that were clearly documented in police reports. So that certainly raised me the question of why is nothing being done with that information? We'll put that aside for a minute, but it helped us focus on one thing that we want to do. And this is an establishment that operates by virtue of the state having issued a liquor license, and that's a point of leverage. So I got on the Liquor Commission website, and I found out that their liquor license is up for renewal soon. It's up in November, and I found the process around that. And I think that armed with that information, we needed to just decide what we wanted to do. So we got a petition going. We know we can get what's called a remonstrance hearing in front of the Liquor Commission, where the owner will have an opportunity to come and state his case and put on his evidence about why he should continue to operate under the liquor license granted by the state. And the police and the community will have an opportunity to say why we think that needs to be reevaluated. We have hundreds of signatures. We really only needed 10 New Haveners to sign. We have hundreds of signatures of people who say, we want that hearing. We want to bring them in front of the Liquor Commission and let them make their case to us about how they're going to be a better neighbor or how they're going to no longer be a business in our community.
So the liquor license was one prong of the strategy. Sarah, talk to us about the other two prongs of the strategy.
The being there.
Yes,
the main one is being there.
Yes.
So we didn't have, this is evolved organically. We didn't have a big master plan. We knew we were just going to be there, and that's how it started. We said 6 to 8. It seemed like the time that we knew there was a lot of activity there. As people are coming home from work and going to the bar and going in the smokers market. So we wanted to be there during that busy time. It's also, it's an occasion to build community too. So we also decided first day we brought some games and we brought music, and people really liked that. We had people from the cafe coming out and joining us. It was so transforming to have music and community in that space that we decided to try to keep it going. So the next night it was quiet, and so we decided we really wanted to go back to the musical way. Then we brought opera, then we brought hula hooping, then we brought string quartet, and we've just had accordion, all these amazing partners from throughout the city coming forward to be part of this with us. And so that's just evolved through word of mouth, through our own networks. It hasn't been a real a plan that we've put together very carefully, but something that really just emerged out of the community effort itself.
And Sarah, I want to stay with you because you were looking at the impact of this violence interruption initiative on that hotspot. Can you share with us what you found? I believe it was the information from Lieutenant Fumiani.
Right. So there has not been any, there have been no need for police activity there since we've been there. So even though we've only been there 2 hours a night, although there is still drug activity and there is still loitering and things, there's been nothing that has risen to the level of violence or level of disruption that required police presence. And that's really what we've seen. Sometimes it clears out completely when we're there. Other times, there are folks hanging out, but we go up and talk to them, and we really change the dynamic with the people who are there.
I note that during the first week, we've been at this now, this is our third week. During the first week in particular, there were law enforcement officers who came and stopped by the Grand Cafe, and then they went away, and we've continued this work pretty much on our own, and there's been very little of a police presence. I also note that at no point in time have we seen either Mayor Elliker or Chief of Police Dominguez show up. Does this, Karen, I'll start with you. Does this surprise you?
It is disappointing. This has been a community-led and community-driven initiative that has gotten great attention. So there's no way to say you don't know that this is happening. And it is surprising to me. Well, it's disappointing to me that the mayor and the chief would not come and be a part of something that is so positive, so community driven, and is really extending an invitation to try to demonstrate what community policing could look like in our community. But this came about because we were feeling that lack of leadership and lack of partnership. And so I guess in that way, it's not surprising, because we put our heads together and said, what are we going to do as a community? Because we weren't getting that sort of support. And, it's been amazing. So the statistics that Sarah's able to talk about policing are amazing. The other things, the community building that's happened out there, neighbors that have met neighbors out there, the engagement with the people, predominantly young men who hang out at that site, has been amazing. The conversations we've had, the attempt to connect people to resources. It's been great. We've brought out information about New Haven Works and Yale's job pipeline to young people who were very receptive, who were like, yes, I would like a job. I didn't know about this resource. And hopefully some of that will translate into a new opportunity. Amazing things have happened there, and it is unfortunate that the mayor and the chief have not been there to witness and be a part of it and to support what's happening there. Because I think their leadership is needed to continue what we started and to take it to other places.
Sarah, you and Karen and I have had conversations about what this is and what this isn't. And I think all of us have a strong consensus and a view about the role of law enforcement in our communities. So talk to us about how we see this initiative, what we're trying to do in the neighborhood, because I want to dispel the notion that, we are encouraging, the cops to come in and crack heads, and we want to see, the New Haven Police Department as an invasive presence in our neighborhood.
Yeah. No, I mean, I think part of what we're doing is just demonstrating what can happen when there's just a positive presence that is continuous and humane and supportive. The first couple of nights we were just there. I mean, they didn't know what we were doing there really. But I think now it's seen as a positive thing. Everybody waves at us when we come. It's expected. They're like waiting for us to get there. And I think when you think about why we have these problems, there are unmet needs, right? And so we need to figure out how we meet those needs so that people aren't turning to violence and turning to selling drugs and stuff. And so we need to find a way for people to connect with others they trust, who can help them access those resources. And that's what we're doing in a small way, and showing that it doesn't take that much. It just takes people being there, showing up, taking the time, caring. And if we had more people like that, it could be professionals or non-professionals, but some kind of a structure that did more of that kind of street outreach, street level communication, not in a law enforcement way, but in a just supportive way, that could really go a long way.
A few days ago, the city pitched to the Board of Alders a proposed plan to use $12 million from the American Rescue Plan funds to go towards installing, and let me break it down, 500 cameras across the city, expanding the shot spotter system, which detects gunshots, and also using the money for additional initiatives, including renovating the NHPD ComStat room, buying new computer terminals, and setting additional dollars aside for overtime for patrol. What is your reaction to these recommendations? Karen, let's start with you.
What is it they say? The definition of insanity is doing the same thing over and over. I just feel like it's like a replay of the history that we're trying to unravel and get ourselves out of, right? I mean, if we think about the mass incarceration of Black and brown bodies in this country, and we think about it connected to the drug trade, right? There was a lot of a panicked reaction to the level of violence in the community at that time, and the reaction was double down on policing. And we ended up incarcerating and changing the life trajectory of entire generations and communities, particularly of Black and Latino males. And we started to sort of reckon with that. And we started to realize there were different ways of doing it. And, the Black Lives Matter movement and all of that sort of shifted it. And we started thinking about different ways. And then, right, we started to panic again when violence started ticking up. And instead of holding strong to what we've been saying, the lessons we've learned, we get back into this policing model. And I just don't want to see us doubling down there, and particularly with the COVID relief money, which is intended to be investment in communities that redress this history of inequities. And so, I want to see that money going into the things that we know are the root cause of why Black and brown, particularly young men, are standing in front of a store all day long. Right? We should be investing in workforce development, investing in jobs pipeline, investing in industry and job creation in our community. We should be investing in treatment and diversionary services. We should be investing in harm reduction services. We should be helping sex workers, and I just feel like we're sort of doubling back down into investing in the criminal justice, the law enforcement side of the system, and we're not out there with the big, bold proposals about how are we investing in our community so people are housed and fed and have jobs and can do for their community, for their families and their community.
Sarah?
Well, I would say the figure that really stood out to me from that list was the $3.8 million for cameras. I don't think there's any evidence that cameras are going to make us safer. And it's just such a huge missed opportunity. Think how many street outreach workers we could hire, how many after-school programs we could fund, and all the things that Karen mentioned. We have this huge opportunity to really invest strategically and at scale in some of these programs, and we're missing that opportunity if we spend $3.8 million on cameras.
Even the messaging, if I can just tell you, the messaging I'm hearing around the cameras is that we invest in this because cameras don't lie. And when you think about what that's saying, it's like cameras don't lie, but what people in our community do, it just I think sends this wrong message about command and control, and that we don't trust in our community. There's no reason to invest in our community. It's just not the direction we should be leaning to if we're really trying to do things that are rooted in racial equity, and then again addressing these longstanding harms.
Maybe asking ourselves the hard question of why is there that mistrust? If people aren't telling us the truth, why is it that they don't trust us? And what structures we need to put in place to build that trust between government and people on the street? And putting that onus on the people in power to build that trust.
That's right. We are coming to the end of the show, and it is my usual practice of my guests to get a little bit more personal, but I actually want to ask these questions in the context of our Violence Interruption initiative. So I'm going to ask Karen first, if you could bring anyone in the world to Grand Cafe, who would it be and why?
I would bring the mayor there to see what we've been doing, and to participate in what has been an amazing community-led effort.
Sarah?
I would bring classrooms from Fairhaven School right next door, with their teachers, to fill the space, to see what else is possible, that they don't need to be afraid, that they're powerful, and that we're with them.
If I were a fairy godmother and I were to wave my magic wand and I said to each of you, I'm going to give each of you $3 million from the rescue fund to allocate to any initiative related to these efforts, how would you spend the money? Karen?
Well, $3 million would just be a down payment on it. I would certainly be investing in getting people into housing that is safe, and that they can afford, and that's in communities that are supportive of their dreams and aspirations and what they want. So I would be investing in helping to make housing affordable for people.
Sarah?
I would, as a sort of emergency measure, really try to flood the neighborhoods that are really hurting the most right now with support kind of staff, like street or outreach workers. There are a lot of different ways to categorize them, but people who can just talk to folks on the streets who have experience with the system and can really work with people one-on-one, and to just really flood our neighborhoods with folks like that to try to provide the services that are needed right now.
Today is the last day for now of our Violence Interruption initiative, and I want to invite anyone who's listening to come and join us for the parking lot at the corner of East Pearl Street and Grand Avenue. Sarah, I know you've been really working really hard on the entertainment, so talk to us about what we have got lined up. And let me just say, I am showing up with my dominoes, and I encourage anyone who wants a fierce game of dominoes to find me. But Sarah, what else do we have for tonight?
So we have tonight, we have the Elm City Stompers. It's a Dixieland band, and one of the musicians is a neighbor here, Don Harvey. And we also have the choir from the Iglesia para la Ciudad, which is right down the street. And they're bringing, I just spoke with the pastor right before this call, they're bringing a large group from the church to come just be in solidarity with us. So they're not just bringing the singers, but really bringing the whole church community. So that will be great.
Beautiful. Folks, that brings us to the end of our show, Kika's Corner. Thank you for listening. Karen and Sarah, thank you both for being on the show. And I'm looking forward to seeing you in exactly, 3.5 hours at the corner of Grand Avenue and East Pearl Street. Until the next one, here is wishing all of you justice and many, many days of sunshine.
Thank you.
Thank you.